most brands go to customers and they say, do you like this packaging or this packaging? We're thinking about red, blue, and green shirts. Which one do you want more? And you get these very personal answers, but also customers don't actually know which packaging is more effective. What you have to understand from them is like, where do you put this in your house? Where are you most often making your bottles for your babies? When you need a bottle, where do you keep the formula? Where are you keeping your bottles? Most of the time it's the kitchen for probably most families, but it might not be. How accessible they want that to be. That changes what the packaging can look like or feel like even. It also might create some product opportunities for you. Maybe you end up with like, here's now a beautiful canister that our containers fit perfectly in. So you can keep this on your counter and it's aesthetically pleasing, it's gorgeous, and our canisters fit inside.
Back in the early days, like before 2020, you were like talking about new age retention, like the things that everyone's excited about now.
I've been talking about retention for 8 years when like nobody cared about it. And I just was, screaming into a brick wall about the fact that your existing customers matter just as much as new customers. And I'm not like, I think I got a reputation as like in by acquisition. I'm not. Because that's an important piece of growing a business. And I also believe like, why bother with acquisition if you're just like churning out customers as soon as they come in the door?
So you were like, you had a consulting business that was like churn reduction, fixing churn before that was even a thing, like before that was cool, before the cool kids were doing it. Why do you think over the last 5 years, why do you think retention became hot? Like, why is that happening?
It's happening right now, mostly because like acquiring customers is harder than ever. The economy is a factor in that, but also like ad spend, like the cost of running ads and has risen over time. I think that also in larger businesses where they're looking at, hey, we have all these customers who have bought from us once, whether that's like investors are seeing that and calling it out to them, or they're like just looking around the business, like where can we kind of, oh gosh, I was just tweeting about this morning, but like where can we squeeze the juice a bit more? I think like as business owners, you look through P&L, the way the business is operating and look for those gaps. So, over the last few years, I think smarter businesses have been looking at that, but it's definitely, in the last couple of months, I have seen so many brands looking to hire someone to focus on retention, which is like great for you and me, but
we're only two.
Yeah. And it's also interesting because there are people who position it as like, well, it's really an email and SMS job. And retention is so much more than email and SMS. Like that's a piece of the puzzle, but it cannot be the sole focus of a person who is supposedly leading retention, or that whole piece, like the whole CX side, the customer experience of the brand, and everything else that goes into retention, pricing, product, packaging, all those things will be completely missed if they're only focused on email and SMS.
Down to Chat is brought to you by Postscript. In my opinion, Postscript is the SMS platform built for Shopify brands. To be totally transparent, we just switched at Jones Road to Postscript, and it is the best decision we've ever made. We were on a competitor before, and they started tacking on all types of fees. The platform was not being improved at all. It was just getting really expensive, and the service we were getting was just nothing compared to what we've received from Postscript since being with them. The product with Postscript is just hands down the best that I've ever used. To me, it has the best integrations for Shopify stores of all sizes. It's got the best feature set. The segmentation is the easiest and most powerful. The pop-ups are great. But really the thing that I love is I've never experienced such great service from a software provider. The only time I heard from our previous provider was around contract renewal time. But with Postscript, they've gone out of their way above and beyond to make our program uber successful. And it's really evident that they care about us getting as much value out of our program as possible. So in my opinion, with Postscript, you get the best product on the market, you get it at the best price, and you get it with the best service. There's a reason why the fastest growing Shopify brands like Dr. Squatch, Native, Olipop, Feastables, and now Jones Road Beauty are all using Postscript for their SMS program. Sign up for Postscript today to take your SMS program to new heights.
Yeah, we talk about it as like almost like this customer journey where the customer starts off from an ad, and then you have one person all the way at the end when they went through the entire journey, bought the product, got the product, hated or liked the product, and then you have this one person that's clicking send in Klaviyo or send in Postscript, and they're the person that's supposed to fix everything from product to price to positioning. Like this one person's supposed to fix everything. Like we were talking, Joanne and I were talking about this. Like how if you're crushing on email, right? Like your segmentation is solid, your open deliverability, all of it's solid. You're like 50%, 55%, right? And it's like your SMS is crushing again, like you're still not at 100%. So you're never going to get the squeeze that the quote unquote squeeze you're looking for from email and SMS, which is fascinating. But also, why do you think it became that way? Like, why do you think retention became synonymous with like email marketing?
Well, it's funny because email, because it's just in the middle of everything, it's both the scapegoat and the hero for like whatever's happening in the business. It's retention marketing because it's talking to existing people, like people who already know about you. Acquisition is, people who don't know about the brand already. There's no way you can email or text them. I think a lot of people just consider that retention marketing. And I truly believe it's education around what retention actually is, and that it is across multiple pieces of the business. Email is a good portion of it. I'm not going to say that it's not, it's very important. Email is also an acquisition tool though. And so you can think about email SMS in a lot of different ways, and a lot of brands just kind of leverage it for the purposes of sales and getting existing customers to come back and buy more, and winning back customers who haven't been around for a while. That's kind of the intention behind email for a lot of brands, and retention is it's those things, but it's also building relationships, which you can do through email. And yeah, I don't know, it might be an education thing. It might just be like, that's the way email is positioned. For e-commerce brands, it's like, that's the way that we talk to our existing customers is through email and SMS. So that is retention, right? Like talking at them is retention, isn't it? No, it's not.
I love it. It's so fascinating to me because Jones is probably a good example of the email kind of flipped into semi-acquisition, because like a huge chunk of our customers are going through this quiz and they're kind of pre-purchased, but they're in our email flow. And that's like kind of like almost a retention tool plus an acquisition tool, kind of all in one. And we think about like if we pivot and think of email as like a communication tool, but it's just one touch point, right? There's 10, 15, 30 others. I think that's an interesting way to look at it. And it's also seeing the flip side of that now is fascinating, where retention used to be just email and SMS. And now it's like, there are tools kind of like you can find emails of people that didn't purchase, reach out to those people. And that's also kind of a retention tool now. So I think retention is just like either underinflated or overinflated, depending on who's selling what, which is a fascinating shift we've seen.
Yeah. There's also the like, brands that have kind of like a head of e-commerce or something like that. That person used to do a lot of more retention focused work, like both acquisition and retention. And brands are just getting more and more refined in how they think about it and what someone who's a head of e-commerce ought to be doing, and how they can leverage team to like experts in different areas to come in and really drive. Because ultimately one person can't do all acquisition and all retention, but especially as a brand grows, right? Like you can do it early on. One person can do all the things for a brand, but you hit a certain point where you have to start bringing people in that can really help you move those channels more.
So we think about, if we were to think about retention today, 2023, a brand decides like, okay, well, we know the sequence of events because we've spoken to brands, you and I, like where it's like, we first hire the growth guy's crushing, continues to crush, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh shit, like we had this kind of expected LTV of 4x of our first purchase, and that's not working. So we sold this to investors that even though our AOV is $47 and we're spending $107 on acquisition, it'll be dramatically higher because of this kind of like lie of LTV that has never been demonstrated for this brand. So they kind of jump on Twitter, drop the thread and say like, I think retention is the way we fix our business. They're high on retention, put out the JD on LinkedIn. And then they talk to, you know, a bunch of people that are like, you're the key to the castle. You're the person to fix it. Now, assuming somebody that's less experienced jumps in and takes the job, like, how do you even start with a brand that's been ignoring retention for 2, 3, 4 years? Like, is there any, like, how do you fix that?
For brands that have more than one SKU, which is most brands, the easiest, like, quick win is to find the product that a whole bunch of people have bought one of, and see if you can get them to buy more. Like, by providing value to them in what those other products are. So sometimes people will buy one product in your lineup, and they either just like don't know about the other products, or they don't know why it would benefit them, or it's you have 27 other products and they don't know which one to try next. So it's really about like education and positioning to them of, hey, you know, you bought our lipstick, and people who buy lipstick first from us, like who come to us for our lipstick, most of the time they are also buying, you know, a brow and a blush. Like there's all different, you know, whatever it is. So we're going to take those two things and bundle them up, and it's a package that doesn't exist on the website. Like no one else can find it. It's just offered through email to this particular segment. And you position it as that, like, hey, this is an exclusive package for you because you bought our lipstick. You know, that kind of thing makes people really excited. It's like the inverse of FOMO, where they're like, oh, that's just for me. That's really cool. So, and then also like telling them, hey, other people just like you made this decision, because we all want to know what other people are doing and then would do that thing. So it's playing on a lot of different psychological principles. But that's a really quick win for most brands, is like go in and find that one product that, you know, 10,000 people have bought one of and never come back, and then figure out like what are the other things that people who bought that thing are buying that did come back, bundle it up and send it to those customers.
Yeah, it's genius. When I think about like quick wins and retention, that's usually less of a thing, right? With growth people, a quick win is like new creative and a new ad set, right? Yeah. With retention people, it's like, it's very rare to have like a really, really quick win because retention is so holistic. But I think you nailed it, that like there are quick wins in retention. Now, I guess like going 30 days into a new role where you're like, okay, I got the quick win. I showed that I mean business. A question that I get pretty often from like both retention and CX is like, is there a way to demonstrate that this like has more value, that it's not just like a cost center, it's not a pay to play, like this is like a real role across the business that's more holistic? And my answer when it comes to CX is always like, I tried doing that at the beginning of my career. It was a waste of my time. Like if a brand is not bullish on CX, like if I have to sell that to you, it's not the right gig for me. Yeah. I think retention is probably slightly different. So I'm curious what your take is. Like, how do I get retention bought in across the business?
I think those quick wins definitely help. They help like lay the foundation for that. But then also building out so I always like to have like one or two kind of quick, easy projects that I'm working on, and then a bigger long-term project that's going to not as quickly move the needle, but still move it. That is, you know, looking across your product lineup. That's looking at the customer experience. It's working collaboratively with those other teams. So that kind of 30 to 60 day time period is the time where, well, in those early days, you want to be building relationships, but I think that's where you really dig in with those cross-functional teams to see, like, how can I help you? Like, just go to them and ask what their problems are. What are they trying to solve for? And, like, what is the person who leads your CX team? What's their biggest problem? What's the merchandising team's biggest problem? What's the warehouse's biggest problem? Go and collect all of those. And then, of course, like everything in the world of like anything related to email and retention, it's like it depends on what you do next. But creating those relationships and looking at their problems and saying, how can I help solve their problems? Because a lot of times retention can help with that, because you have a view, like you're kind of in this integrator role. If you can help solve someone else's problem, that solidifies you in that business, because now they're a champion for your role. They're going to lean on you, and your leadership is going to see that naturally.
Okay, here's why I love this. You took a retention mindset and then you brought it into your role at the company to and it's what it is, right? Like at its core, like you took this mindset of like, how do I make sure customers feel like I'm on their team, I value them, I'm trying to help them. And then you took it to like, here's what I do in my first 30, 60 days, which is so impactful, because like most people are coming in and looking like how they can look good, right? Like how they can kind of like increase X by X,
right?
Versus focusing on like, how can I uplift the team, which is inspiring and exciting. It's this like retention mindset that's more than just like customer retention. It's making sure people are excited with you being there. I think the other kind of really interesting thing is I could never shake this conversation I had 2.5 years ago with this person who was looking for retention consulting. And I got on a call and he was like, my retention is currently like 75% of my customers are buying more than once. And I'm like, why are you talking to me? That's insanely high. And he was like, I really think I can get 100% retention. And I was like, what are we even talking about? And he was like, I have a team that picks up the phone and calls people and says like, hey, you bought this, why did you not buy it again? The AOV was like $35. And I was just like, I think this is one of the large retention problems we're facing, is that there's a weird expectation, especially when it comes to food and beverage, where it's like, not everyone's going to like the product. But I think something that I think about often, and I'm curious your thoughts, is like, why has it become a thing where instead of focusing on increasing value for the top 30% of people that probably have a high net worth, that already love your brand, like it's so much easier to get somebody from 210 LTV to 240 versus like go after every $35 customer and get them to 40. I'm curious, A, your thoughts, B, why people aren't talking about this as much as maybe I think they should.
Yeah, I mean, definitely like those talking to your top customers and understanding what their needs are and making their lives better and easier, that's another massive quick win, is like, how can we make our existing top customers even happier than they already are? Taking someone who is generally happy to always happy is a lot easier than taking someone who's like massively depressed to happy. Like that's just, ask any therapist, it's a much easier job. So yeah, like targeting those top customers is really important. I think it's honestly an ego thing. Like I think brand owners, it's their baby, right? Like they build this product, they came up with the idea.
How could you not like it?
Right. So why are you not coming back? And ultimately, like as consumers, we have an endless amount of choices in most categories, and our tastes change, the seasons change, like our buying habits change with that. And there are some things that you'll buy for a long time and then just stop. And there are some things you'll buy your entire life. And yeah, I think it's like operator ego of, I want to get everyone to like this product, and not understanding that not everyone will. And you have to go after the people who are already committed to the brand. See how you can make their lives better. And by go after, I mean like talk to them, build relationship with them, and build like a really special experience for them with your brand. Because that's how they're going to go out and find more people just like them. Like they have friends and family who are just like them, who they're going to bring into your brand. And you can go after the people who buy like that project of like find the people who bought one product and then bundle up some other things. That's going to get a certain percentage of those customers back. It's not going to win them all back at all. Because there are people who just won't work for. Maybe they bought one product and they bought the lipstick and they really actually hated it, but they just didn't write a review. They didn't didn't ask for a refund. They didn't return it. They just really didn't like it, and that's okay, because that's the problem, like kind of what we were talking about at the beginning. Why go acquire customers who are just going to like leave when you could find out what makes for a really amazing customer and go find more of those customers. Use that as information for acquisition so that maybe you get closer to 100%. You're not going to get 100%. I don't think anyone.
Yeah.
I mean, I would love if anyone is listening to this and has 100% retention, please let us know.
Season 3 of Down to Chat is brought to you by Tapcart. I know we chatted about this last season, but there's so many cool brands that have created an app with Tapcart in the last couple of years, and I wanted to highlight one of the ones that I've been looking at. So Chubbies has been around for a minute. They're in the men's fashion space. I think what's interesting about Chubbies is they kicked this off in 2018. At this point, they have 137,000 push subscribers, which is kind of crazy. It's like these people are all getting notifications every time they send something in app, which is super cool. The return on app spend, which Tapcart calls ROAS, not the ROAS but a different ROAS, is 189x, which is pretty insane. I think the unique thing about Chubbies is that they're looking at this as a unique way to kind of reach this top 10 to 30% of customers with deals, drops, brand news, all that fun stuff. I think when you sprinkle in some app exclusives in your strategy, it's really helpful for retention. So I think it's a fun thing to check out. If you're looking to learn more about Tapcart, you can check out tapcart.com/down to chat, and you'll get your first 2 months free. One of our listeners actually called Caden Lane. Brian from Caden Lane launched with Tapcart a couple of weeks ago and just showed me his app on Twitter the other day, and I was blown away. It's pretty insane how quick they've built it, but also how thorough and amazing it is. So definitely check out Tapcart, and thanks for listening. I think it's something that excited me about joining Jones is that that's kind of the way Cody views this. Like he tweeted about this a couple of weeks ago, how like TikTok was a great acquisition channel, but sucked on retention. And I think, viewing that as like, no, it's not like Eli's fault that these people didn't stick around. It's a different customer profile. Yep. And it's like, there's only so much you can do. And I think the important point to make is like, yeah, you should definitely be spending time, resources, email, SMS, customer conversations to try to get people from order number 1 to order number 2. But I think you should also not be sleeping on the tiny little incremental impact of getting somebody from order 3 to order 4, or spending a little bit more money in each order. Like the AOV, the increase of AOV is going to make such a massive difference for you versus like always trying to stretch LTV, which is another order. Right. Something we think about on the Jones side is like, we do our absolute best to get people to purchase more than one product, especially if you have multiple SKUs, to purchase more than one product in order number 1. That way you have a significantly higher chance that you'll like one of the products and you'll be like, oh, I love the eye cream. I'm not a Miracle Bomb girly, and that's fine. Yeah. But the brand still is amazing. And like on the CX side, you can also like, I don't like the product, but I love the experience, all that stuff that we talk about. But I think instead of focusing on just like hounding people for another order, increasing AOV also increases the potential that they'll like a different product, which is fun.
Yeah, there's also like that. A big piece of retention is building like community and experience. I don't think that every brand needs to have like a Facebook group or, like a Slack community for their customers. That's not what I mean by community. That might be right for your brand. And I've talked to so many brands who their customers have spun up Facebook groups like on their own. The brand has nothing to do with it, and they're like, wow, there's 37,000 people in this Facebook group that are talking all the time. Like there's 200 new posts a day. Like that's huge. Tons of UGC in that, in images, and also voice of customer is like right there. So there are brands who community happens naturally in that way, but also like just a sense of I belong here and this brand understands me. So, they might not like the Miracle Bomb, but they feel like they connect to the mission behind the brand. And it might not work for them, but they might have a friend who thinks in a similar way to them and who they're going to recommend the brand to. I've recently talked to a couple of brands who like they're this might be just very specific to the baby formula world, but I think there's probably others where they're selling to the parent, but the baby's actually the ultimate decider. So, and I think like probably a lot of things in kind of kids world is this way. If your kid doesn't like the toy, if your kid doesn't like the formula, you're not going to buy it anymore. That's just, and there, I don't know outside of parenting if there are other instances of that where like the end user is not the buyer, but you can still build a sense of community and a sense of connection to the brand, and even if that person never buys from you anymore, because they are going to send people to you, and that's like the like dark channels that you can't really measure. And that's, I think like we went through this period of time, and this is probably when I was screaming at a brick wall about retention, was when we were in the height of like measure everything and reporting back on ad spend, and like, I mean, ROAS is still important, like all of that matters still. But I think we're coming into a time where brands are more likely to like look at the bigger picture, and not everything has to be or can be measured to the end of its life. And this kind of brand building experience and building advocates out in the world for your brand, you're not gonna be there when they're at the coffee shop talking to their friend. And if you don't have like a referral affiliate program, there's really no way to track that. And maybe you even do, but they don't use it. So like there's all kinds of ways that people come to us that we can't. Attribution is like the hot topic on Twitter these days, and you can slice attribution 100 different ways, and it's going to look different to every brand, and people will fight about it all day long. But ultimately, like there's a lot in retention that you can't attribute, and you have to just look at the incremental gains over time, and also customer sentiment. Are we seeing less support tickets? Are we is that engagement in that Facebook group that we don't even manage, is it up? You can measure other things to determine whether retention is working or not.
I love all of this. 3 things that are coming to mind as you're talking through this. A, it's time to retire. Like if you can't measure, it doesn't matter. Like fuck that. The other 2 things, I think your point about formula is so fascinating, because I was looking at Bobbie, Bobbie, the formula company, and it's fascinating because they anticipated that the child might not like it. So there are like multiple pages to explain how to introduce new formula and do it slowly to kind of like eliminate the chance that the end user doesn't like it, which is fascinating. The third thing, when you're talking about like it doesn't have to be a Facebook group for your brand, I think that the interesting kind of like founder dynamic that I usually see is, I'm a founder, so I have to fix it and I have to move quickly. And it's like, oh, here's a solution, start a Facebook group. And it's, when you think about community, so much of this is emotional, right? It's creating this space where people feel, the reason why our community crushes is because Bobbie has been talking about confidence and feel good in your skin for 30 fucking years. Like this is nothing new. So when a community blossoms out of that, it feels native and natural versus like, hey, I sell underwear on the internet, let me start a Facebook group, and then have everyone automatically joined, and feels odd.
It's also like and this comes from talking to your customers, what do they want to talk about with other people about your brand? I was talking to a lash brand, and they had this example of this group of customers who's made a Facebook group, and what they do is these lashes are like in sections. And so you can buy them in different sections, and they're all different lengths and thicknesses and whatever. And I'm not a lash girly, so I don't know how it works. But all these women who buy lashes, they are posting pictures of their lashes on their eyes, and then they're saying what the like recipe is for their combination, how they got that result. And other people are commenting, you look beautiful, it's great on you, like I've never tried this version, I'm going to order right now. Like that's why they built the Facebook group, was to be able to see what combos other people were building, and go from there, right? Like that's the brand now can take that information. They can look for those kind of repeating patterns of combos and start to create those bundles or packages or market that more on their website. They don't have to engage in that Facebook group at all in order to benefit from it. And they already are benefiting from it just by letting the community just do their thing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Spot on. I think the interesting thing about community is like you find these like massive communities that people just like, it's clear that they optimize for size. Like everyone is auto added, everyone is invited, and it's pitched as one thing. But when you head in, you're like, it doesn't feel very engaged. It doesn't feel like people are excited. It doesn't feel authentic to the brand. So I think it's like community became like a new buzzword, and every brand's like, how do I activate my community? And maybe you shouldn't. Like maybe you should just kind of sit tight and focus on other core things. Switching gears a little bit. I want to read a little bit of a LinkedIn post that you shared.
Okay.
And get your insight, because I think it's an interesting take, because on one hand we talk about talking to customers, and on the other hand, the LinkedIn post was stop asking your customers what features they want to see. They don't know shit about features. Sorry. What they know is a problem they're facing. And then you kind of like go in detail. And I think it's a very, very appropriate take from we've seen every SaaS company ever be like, what features do you want to see next? Can you elaborate?
Yes. So this was like a SaaS spend on this conversation, but we can make it e-commerce too. Mm-hmm. The intention is like most brands go to customers and they say, and I've received these surveys before too, mm-hmm. like, do you like this packaging or this packaging? Do you want, we're thinking about red, blue, and green shirts. Which one do you want more? Like what color is your favorite color? And you get these very personal answers, but also they don't know. Like customers don't actually know which packaging is more effective. They don't have that education and training in like design and psychology and all those things that go into packaging. Even just like how your product ends up being used can be part of the packaging. So they can't really make those decisions for you. What you have to understand from them is like, where do you put this in your house? Like when you are, so we'll use baby formula. Where are you most often making your bottles for your babies? Like when you need a bottle, where do you keep the formula? Where are you keeping your bottles? Most of the time it's the kitchen for probably most families, but it might not be. And do you can talk to them about, and maybe it's like less leading questions, but really digging in on like how accessible they want that to be. What you're getting at is this a package that's going to sit on someone's counter and need to have like a certain look and feel to it that is a bit more sturdy? Like if you're thinking about packaging, you're going to think about all those things. How it will appear in the customer's home if it's something that's sitting on their counter all the time. But if it's something that they are putting away in a cabinet, if it's something that they aren't necessarily like leaving out all the time, that changes what the packaging can look like or feel like even. So it also might create some product opportunities for you. Maybe you end up with like, here's now a beautiful canister that our containers fit perfectly in. So you can keep this on your counter and it's, aesthetically pleasing, it's gorgeous, and our canisters fit inside. And maybe it has like, your brand has like a little swoop, and so that new canister has like a swoop on it. So it's kind of branded, but not really. Those kinds of like product opportunities, and even just understanding what you need to focus on, comes out of those natural conversations with customers. Somebody on that post asked me, well, what are your top 5 questions to ask? And I was like, well, it depends, because it's really not about like, here are 11 questions I'm going to ask in this interview and question, answer. I'm not looking to check off a checklist when I talk to customers. I certainly go in with a certain intention based off of like what I need to understand, but it's more conversational. It's like this back and forth of digging in, asking them about their lives, about the way that they leverage the product, about the things that they do with it. Are you taking that canister of formula somewhere with you, or is it always sitting? Do you only use it at home? Like those pieces of information are going to shape your product lineup and the way that you go to market.
Incredible. I think a lot of this was new to me when I joined Olipop, and I was having a lot of customer conversations and learning that the way we were pitching the product was it was sensational, but it didn't cover a lot of the customer usages. Like indulgence came across a little later on in the Olipop journey, but that was like how most customers weren't necessarily swapping from a Diet Coke. They were not drinking soda. They were not soda drinkers early on, and they were just focused on like, how can I have this moment? It was almost like you sit in a corner post dinner and have an Olipop when your kids are in the other room having screen time, right? It was like this moment of sanity, which was like such a different spin. And again, it doesn't mean that we should be pitching it differently, positioning it differently. It might just mean like a newsletter feature that when somebody reads it, they're like, oh, that I feel seen. Like that's a very specific moment. And I think that was like an interesting spin. I know we have like 7 minutes left, and I have one more topic that I want to get to. I think this had me laughing this morning. Phil Jackson from Future Commerce was like, when did web optimization become code for milk a customer like a cow? I think we've seen two sides of the spectrum. You see the people that are like, segmentation is a lie, send full sends. 95% of the time, these people are working in an email agency. I think that's a little piece here to
send more
keep
often.
in mind.
Send more often is the answer.
Send to everyone. Send more often. Segmentation is a lie. It's all about revenue. It's not about anything else. I think that and then there's the other extreme, like segmentation is a Bible. Send very little. Send only important. Very, very kind of like. And I wonder, two questions for you. Number one, like, why does it feel like there's not a middle line here? A. B. How do you feel about segmentation? Like, what's the Bible? Like, how do we view email?
Yeah. So it's kind of like how we went from nobody caring about retention to everyone caring about retention. I think over time, it just like those two extremes have to exist, and so that we can come to a middle ground. So I just think it's like time. We haven't done this stuff enough. We haven't both extremes haven't really flexed those muscles enough to realize like, oh, it's too much or it's too little. I'm not getting the results that I want. So I think it's time in order for the majority of brands to realize that there is a middle ground. Segmentation ultimately is about creating a positive experience for the customer. It doesn't have to be like you're not sending to lists of 20 people. It can be like if that's maybe your opted in group of customers on a certain program, great, send it to those 20 people. But you don't have to get that extreme about segmentation. You want to understand who customers are that have made certain purchases, who have done certain actions. And ultimately, like that tweet is very applicable to retention as well, because you can approach retention from how can I get more out of my customers? And that's, I think, the like send to everyone. Or you can approach it from like, how can we give to our customers so that they have a better value from our brand, so that knowing that will lead to more revenue, longer LTV, like higher AOVs, all those things come out of building relationship and adding value to customers. So much more than like, let's just keep throwing sale after sale after sale at you. So there is a middle ground. And I think the key with segmentation is, I talk to a lot of brands who say like, they're so overwhelming. There's so many ways I can segment that I just don't do anything. And that paralysis by analysis thing is like, it's killing a lot of people because they aren't segmenting. They're batch and blasting to their entire list. And you have to start somewhere. So start with your most important segments, like engaged, unengaged with email is a really easy place to start. You know, if you have a core product offering, people who have bought that core product versus people who haven't, people who have taken your quiz and never purchased, but versus people who have purchased from the quiz, people who purchased without ever having taken the quiz. Like there are kind of those groups that you can start with and and then go talk to those customers and better understand what that messaging is to each of them. If you have no context on what the quiz is for, why you should do it, and you've already made a purchase, like why should I go back and take the quiz at this point? You need to give them context for that and show them why it's valuable, why it matters for their time. Ultimately, like customers are, even in the case of like a subscription, customers are brand new customers every single month. Every single purchase, they are a new customer to you. We spend all this time getting people in the door, and then we are just like, keep taking their subscription. I've talked to brands who are like, I don't want to send a heads up email about the, your order's going to ship in 5 days. We're going to charge your card, because then they'll cancel or, delay. That is a recipe for disaster in the long run, because you're just kind of taking advantage of your existing customers versus building that relationship and value and showing them that you value them as much as you did when they first came. Like we spend all this time in acquisition and ads and getting everything right on that side of it. And then we don't spend any time getting it right once they become customers. And we forget that they have choice every single time they purchase, which essentially makes them a new customer. Like they're constantly evolving and changing. So is your product lineup. And so you have to treat them kind of the same as new customers, even once they're in the door.
That's such a great piece of feedback to finish up on. I think the last thing I'd say is, I think Netflix, which is not an e-commerce brand, but they do a fantastic job of like continuing to show the value of being subscribed. Like, hey, if you like this, you should try this show. And they message you, because the more you use it, the better likelihood you have of sticking around. If you just forget about it, you have apps like Truebill that'll just like, hey, you haven't used Netflix in 6 months, time to unsubscribe. So I think like pushing value of the product instead of like ignoring them is probably a good place to start.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure. I'm mindful that you have a hard
stop. Talk to you all day.
I know we definitely can do a version 2 and 3 and 4. And where can people find you? Anything to plug?
Twitter, LinkedIn. I'm Val Geisler on both. Next time Cody is sick, let's hijack it again.
This is going to be a recurring segment. And if anyone has any questions for Val or questions for myself or something we should talk about next time, drop us a line on Twitter, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Bye.